I can't believe this is happening.
It's okay, I'm here.
We're all here for each other.
She's crashing. Those two words stopped the world. Jae-Hyun stood in the middle of that sterile ICU hallway, fluorescent lights humming above him, the antiseptic burning his throat, and those two words hit him harder than any blade ever had. Dr. Kim didn't look away. She was the kind of woman who'd learned not to soften what couldn't be softened. Mr. Jae-Hyun, your wife's internal bleeding is more severe than the initial scan indicated. We're taking her back into surgery now. I need you to understand. Her chances of surviving the next 3 hours are approximately 30%. 30%. He'd spent 15 years calculating odds. 15 years knowing exactly how much risk he could absorb, how much he could survive, how much violence a man could carry before it broke him. He had never once, in all of those years, been afraid. He was afraid now. Beside him, Min-jae rocked slowly from foot to foot, both hands pressed flat against his thighs, fingers splayed. He was whispering, not to anyone in the hallway, not to his father, but to himself. Something about the breakfast routine, something about the color of the Tuesday plates. The world had shattered around this boy, and his mind had retreated to the only place it still felt safe. Jae-Hyun's hands were trembling, not from rage, not from the cold weight of danger pressing in from every angle, from something far worse, from the unbearable, crushing possibility that he might lose her. His eyes closed, and the screen went dark. 3 days earlier. If you're already locked in, and I can tell you are, go ahead and hit that like button right now, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. London? Toronto? Houston? Let me know. Your support is what keeps these stories coming. Now, let's go back to where it all began to fall apart. The morning started with pancakes. That sounds like a small thing. It wasn't. 18 months ago, the idea of Jae-Hyun Song standing in a sun-warmed kitchen on a Tuesday morning, wearing a gray Henley with a dish towel draped over his shoulder, making pancakes from scratch. It would have been laughable. Men like him didn't make pancakes. Men like him didn't have kitchens that smelled like vanilla and warm butter. Men like him didn't have mornings. But here he was. You put too much batter in the pan again, Amara said without looking up from her coffee. She was sitting at the island counter, one foot curled beneath her, reviewing the week's supplier invoices for the restaurant. Beautiful in the completely ordinary way that Jae-Hyun had come to understand was the rarest kind of beautiful, the kind that didn't require an audience. The pancake is the same size it always is, he said. It overflows every time. It's called rustic. She looked up at him then, one eyebrow. The look that, in another life, would have been a death sentence coming from him. From her, it was just devastating in a different way. Rustic, she repeated. Artisanal, he revised. She laughed, actually laughed. The sound of it moved through the kitchen like something physical, and Jae-Hyun turned back to the stove so she wouldn't see his expression. He hadn't grown up in a house with laughter like that. He had learned, slowly and painfully, what to do with it. Min-jae was at the far end of the kitchen table, arranging the condiment bottles by color. Ketchup, then sriracha, then honey, then the pale yellow mustard he never actually used but always included. He did this every morning. The routine mattered. The order mattered. As long as the condiments went red, orange, amber, yellow, the day was correctly organized. Jae-Hyun had learned not to move them. Jia was on her third napkin dragon. She drew them while she waited for food, elaborate, detailed creatures that Amara had started photographing and posting on the restaurant's social pages. Customers had started asking about them. There was a regular on Thursday nights who always requested a window seat specifically so he could check if a new napkin dragon was taped to the glass inside the hostess stand. Eunwoo was doing something at the counter that Jae-Hyun only half understood, correcting the receipt total from last night's dinner, apparently, because he had counted the change and found a $4 discrepancy, and this was, in his words, mathematically unacceptable. Jae-Hyun watched all three of them, and felt something in his chest that he still didn't have a word for. Not happiness exactly. Heavier than happiness. More serious. Like standing at the edge of something vast and knowing that all the things you'd done wrong in your life had somehow, improbably, still brought you here. The Thursdays are fully booked through the end of the month, Amara said, turning a page. We need to talk about expanding the reservation window. Min-suk thinks we should hire a second-floor manager. Min-suk thinks we should install a panic room. But here we are. She said it lightly, like a joke. It wasn't entirely a joke. She knew Min-suk. She understood what he was. Tiger and Tamarind had become something neither of them fully planned. It had started as cover, a legitimate business with a believable story behind it, a place with enough foot traffic to explain certain financial movements. But somewhere between the first real dinner service and the third month of actually caring whether the bibimbap was good, it had become real. The staff called Amara chef's wife, even though she technically handled operations and not the kitchen. The regulars brought their anniversaries and their parents' birthdays and their first dates. Children drew dragons on napkins. It was, by every measure that mattered, a life. Which was exactly why Jae-Hyun noticed, without letting himself react, that Min-suk had checked the street-facing window 3 times in the last 10 minutes. Min-suk wasn't built for kitchens and breakfast conversations. He was built for standing in doorways and calculating threat vectors, which was what he was doing even now, leaning in the frame of the restaurant's back entrance at just past 10 in the morning, coffee untouched in his hand. Black Hyundai, he said quietly when Jae-Hyun stepped outside. Same plates as yesterday. Parked across from the school during drop-off. Then here. How long? Since you opened. Jae-Hyun didn't look at the street. He didn't need to. Anyone come inside? Not yet. That word, yet, carried everything. They stood in the quiet of the back alley for a moment. Somewhere inside, Amara was laughing at something Jia had said. The sound carried through the kitchen ventilation, faint and warm. I'll run the plates tonight, Min-suk said. No, Jae-Hyun said. I know who it is. Min-suk studied him. After 15 years working alongside this man, he had learned to measure Jae-Hyun's certainty in the economy of his stillness. When he was guessing, he moved. When he knew, he went completely quiet. He was completely quiet now. How long have you known? Min-suk asked. Since Thursday. Min-suk said nothing. In the hierarchy of things they didn't say aloud to each other, that ranked somewhere near the top. He came in the afternoon, after the lunch rush had cleared and before the dinner prep had properly started. The hostess, a bright college student named Dana who believed entirely in the restaurant's charming Korean West African fusion concept and had no idea what the owner used to do for a living, showed him to a corner table with a smile. He didn't look dangerous. That was the thing about Taeyong Choi that people consistently underestimated. He was 42, trim, dressed in a pale blue Oxford shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like a mid-level finance executive taking an early afternoon lunch. He smiled easily. He ordered the jollof rice and kimchi bowl with the tamarind glaze and said it was excellent, which it was. Jae-Hyun sat across from him without being invited to do so. You look well, Taeyong said pleasantly. You should leave. I haven't finished eating. He picked up his chopsticks with the practiced ease of someone who'd been raised holding them. I actually meant what I said. You look well. Content. Whatever that word is that people use for men who've decided they've earned a rest. He paused. I forget the word. Say what you came to say. Taeyong set down his chopsticks. He folded his hands on the table, unhurried, deliberate. His eyes moved briefly toward the window, toward where Jia was visible at her usual after-school corner table, working on what appeared to be a napkin phoenix this time. Then he looked back at Jae-Hyun. You don't get to retire from blood, he said. Softly, almost gently, the way someone says a true thing they've waited a long time to say. You know that. I know that. Whatever story you're telling yourself in this very charming restaurant, it doesn't change what you are. It doesn't change what you owe. Jae-Hyun didn't move. My father sends his regards, Taeyong continued, picking up his chopsticks again. He says you were always his best investment. He's hurt by the silence. He'd like a conversation. Tell your father, Jae-Hyun said, his voice very low and very even, that the conversation ended. Taeyong chewed, swallowed, dabbed his mouth with a napkin. He looked at the window again, at Jia, at her drawing, and then back at Jae-Hyun. Did it, he said. He left a generous tip. The threat left with him, invisible, hanging in the air above the table like smoke. That night, Amara found Jae-Hyun standing at the kitchen window after the children were asleep. Not looking at anything, just standing. Tell me, she said. She didn't ask. She wasn't the kind of woman who asked. He told her. All of it. Taeyong, the black Hyundai Minsuk's surveillance report, the pattern of watches that had been on their building for 10 days before he'd confirmed it. She listened without interrupting. That was something he had always respected about her. She gave information the dignity of silence before she responded to it. When he finished, she said, "We're not running. Amara, we ran before. We left everything. We built this." Her voice was steady, but underneath it was something fierce and load-bearing, like a beam inside a wall. If we run now, we run forever. And I won't raise those children running. I need you to consider. I have considered, she said. The answer is no. She turned from the window and looked at him directly. So figure out another solution. He watched her walk down the hallway toward their bedroom. He turned back to the window. In the street below, a car sat idling at the far corner. He memorized the plates. 3 mornings later, the world broke on a school drop-off. It was a Tuesday, Minjae's favorite day, because Tuesday meant the plates were a specific blue and the routine was precise and predictable. He had his backpack on correctly, both straps, which was a good day indicator. Eunwoo was reading a book in the back seat, while simultaneously pointing out, without looking up, that they were going to hit the light on Harmon if Amara didn't accelerate through the next block. Jia was finishing a drawing of what she described as a tiger with butterfly wings, which is scientifically possible if you think about it in a certain way. Amara was laughing at this theory when the black sedan came from the left. It happened faster than thought. The impact hit the passenger side with the sound of the world folding, metal and glass and the shriek of tires, and then a lurching, spinning momentum that belonged to physics and not to human experience. From inside the car, it was chaos assembled wrong. The horizon tilted, someone's book flying, the paper dragon torn from Jia's hands. Minjae making a sound that was not a scream and not a word, but something more primitive than both. Then stillness. Eunwoo's voice, very careful. Everyone say your name. Jia, I'm here. Minjae was rocking, both hands pressed flat, whispering the condiment order. Red, orange, amber, yellow. Red, orange, amber, yellow. Amara was not saying her name. Amara was not saying anything. The ICU hallway smelled like antiseptic and recycled air and the specific anxiety of people waiting for news they weren't ready to receive. Children stable. Eunwoo had a fractured wrist and a concussion. Jia had bruised ribs. Minjae was physically uninjured, which in some ways made his particular damage harder to locate and treat. Amara was in surgery. Jae-Hyun sat in a plastic chair outside the surgical ward with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands, and Minsuk standing 6 feet away, because Minsuk understood that there were distances a man needed that weren't about physical space. At 2 in the morning, Minjae wandered from the children's wing. The nurses had tried to stop him and had failed, because when Minjae decided to move somewhere, there was a calm, unmovable quality to his intention that was difficult to counter. He found his father in the plastic chair. He sat beside him. He did not speak. After a long moment, he began tapping his fingers on his thigh. A rhythm, steady, repetitive, organizing. Jae-Hyun lifted his face from his hands and watched his son's fingers. Then, without thinking about it, he matched the rhythm. his own fingers on his own knee. The same pattern. Min Jae didn't look at him, but the rhythm steadied. They sat like that for a long time in the fluorescent dark. I won't let them touch us again, Jae-Hyun said. Quietly. Not to Min Jae exactly. Not to the hallway. To something. Min Jae tapped. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The answer as clear as anything he'd ever said. By morning, Min Suk had confirmation. He relayed it in the hospital parking garage, standing between two concrete pillars, voice low enough that it existed only in the space between them. It was coordinated. The driver was hired through a shell company that runs back to Taeyong's operations. But the order didn't come from Taeyong. He paused. It came from his father, Chairman Choi. The branch didn't reach this far. The roots did. Jae-Hyun stared at the oil-stained floor. I can make calls, Min-suk said. He said it the way they both knew how to say that kind of thing, stripped of euphemism but not of intention. 48 hours. This becomes someone else's problem. The old solution. Fast. Clean. Permanent in the wrong direction. Jae-Hyun thought about Min Jae's fingers tapping in the dark. He thought about Jia's tiger with butterfly wings. He thought about Eun-woo saying, "Everyone say your name" in a crushed car, 7 years old, already trying to hold things together. He thought about who he was when he did things the old way. He thought about whether that man deserved what he'd somehow been given in this second life. No, he said. Min-suk waited. We end it permanently, Jae-Hyun said. But we end it the right way. He finally looked up. I kept records, Suka. Everything. Financial routes, shell company chains, account numbers, asset transfers, bribery documentation going back 11 years. I kept it as insurance. He paused. I never planned to use it. Min-suk's expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted. The specific recalibration of a man realizing the game just changed shape entirely. That's a different kind of war, he said. I know. Riskier in some ways. I know that too. Min-suk looked at him for a long moment. You're sure? Jae-Hyun thought about Amara's voice saying figure out another solution. Even in the dark of a hospital parking garage, even with everything on fire, something about that still steadied him. Yes, he said. I'm sure. Now imagine this for a moment. If you were Jae-Hyun right now, standing in that parking garage with everything you love lying in a hospital bed, knowing you have the power to end this with one phone call and one very old favor, what would you do? Would you go the legal route and risk everything on paperwork? Or would you make the call? Drop your answer in the comments below. Be honest. And if this story is hitting you in the chest the way I think it is, hit that like button. Every single one helps us keep telling stories like this one. The federal prosecutor's name was Margaret Osei, and she had the kind of face that had heard every version of every story and had stopped being surprised by any of them around year 6 of her career. She sat across the conference table from Jae-Hyun in a borrowed office that smelled like old carpet and looked at the documents in front of her with the careful, methodical attention of someone defusing something. She read for 11 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up. If a fraction of this is verified, she said, we're looking at organized crime conspiracy, tax evasion, extortion, and 2 counts of attempted murder for hire. It's all verified, Jae-Hyun said. We'll need time to. You don't have time, he said. Not aggressively, just factually. They know I'm moving. They'll escalate before you've finished building your case. I need speed, not precision. Margaret Osei set down the documents. She folded her hands. She looked at him the way prosecutors look at men they are simultaneously prosecuting and relying upon, with a complicated arithmetic of trust and utility working behind her eyes. You understand what immunity looks like here, she said. What it doesn't cover. I understand. And your associate. Min-suk handles logistics. He's not on any document in that folder. She held his gaze. Once we move, she said quietly, there is no turning back. I want you to understand that. Not legally. Not physically. If Chairman Choi feels cornered, and he will feel cornered. The danger level for your family increases before it decreases. Jae-Hyun had already thought about this. He'd spent 2 nights in a hospital chair thinking about nothing else. I know, he said. She pushed a document across the table. He picked up the pen. He signed. What happened next moved the way serious things move. Not quickly, but with a kind of irreversible momentum, like water finding its level. Min-suk made contact with a rival syndicate that had been waiting 18 months for exactly this kind of structural instability inside Chairman Choi's network. A financial journalist at a major outlet received a package containing documented wire transfers. The prosecutor's office began the subpoena process for 12 accounts across 4 countries. It looked, from the outside, like it might be working. It looked like a plan. Then Jae-Hyun's phone buzzed. A photograph. Eun-woo on the school steps. Mid-morning, backpack on, fractured wrist in a brace, talking to a friend near the main entrance. The photo was tight, deliberate, composed like a portrait, not a candid. Time-stamped. 11 minutes ago. Live. Below it, a message. Asterisk, you think paperwork scares us? Asterisk. Jae-Hyun stared at the photograph for 5 seconds. Then he called Min-suk. Pull her from school. Now. All 3 of them. Private location, rotate the address, and… Already moving, Min-suk said. He'd received the same photograph on a secondary alert channel. But Hyun, there's something else. A pause. Our home security system glitched 48 hours ago. I dismissed it as a software error. Another pause, heavier this time. I was wrong. Someone accessed the feed. The silence between them was complete. How long? Jae-Hyun said. I don't know yet. I'm pulling the raw footage now. Don't call me back until you have it. He hung up. He stood, completely still for a moment in the middle of the borrowed office. Then he walked to the window and looked at the street below, at the ordinary traffic, the pedestrians, the city moving the way cities move when they don't know what's happening inside the buildings above them. Someone had been inside their house. While they were inside their house, the thought arrived and did not leave. Amara came back to consciousness on a Thursday afternoon. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in films, with sudden gasping and immediate clarity. It was slow, incremental, a series of small awakenings that the nurses described to Jae-Hyun one by one as they happened. Eyes open. Response to name. Tracking movement. Grip strength. By Thursday evening, she was awake enough to be annoyed by the 4 in her arm and to express this annoyance in terms that made the attending nurse press her lips together to suppress a smile. Jae-Hyun sat beside the bed and didn't say anything for a long time. He just held her hand with both of his, the way he had learned to hold things that mattered. Firmly, without squeezing, with the particular care of someone who understands that held things can still be lost. The kids, she said. Her voice was rough, washed out. Safe. They're with Min-suk at the secondary location. Jia has drawn 14 napkin dragons in the last 4 days. The room looks like a dragon hatchery. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. Close. Tell me what's happening, she said. He told her. The prosecutor. The evidence package. The rival syndicate. The photograph of Eun-woo. The security breach. She listened with her eyes on the ceiling, face still, processing. When he finished, she said, If you fight them. She stopped. Took a breath. The effort was visible. Fight to finish it. Not to survive. To end it. She turned her head to look at him then. I don't want revenge. I want those children to grow up without looking over their shoulder every time a black car comes too close. I know. Promise me it ends, Jae-Hyun. Not slows down. Not gets managed. Ends. He held her gaze. I promise. She closed her eyes. After a moment. You're doing the thing where you look certain to make me feel better. He almost smiled. Is it working? Somewhat. Weeks later, after the hospital and before the warrants, Amara had a moment in a car. They were stopped at an intersection downtown, Jae-Hyun driving. heading back from a routine check-in with the prosecutor's office. A delivery truck to their left pulled forward suddenly, and Amara's hand flew to the dashboard, and she pressed back hard in her seat, her whole body bracing, eyes wide, breath gone. And then the truck was just a truck, pulling forward to the light. Ordinary. But Amara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat on her thighs, the exact gesture that Min-jae used to manage his overwhelm, and stared through the windshield and said nothing. Jae-Hyun didn't say anything either. He didn't offer reassurance. He didn't tell her she was okay or that it was just a truck or that the danger had passed. He just reached over and put his hand over hers. Still, present, there. After a long moment, she said, very quietly, "What if ending them isn't enough?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know. He knew how to eliminate threats. He knew how to calculate odds and execute strategies and survive things that shouldn't be survivable. What he didn't know, what kept finding him in the quiet spaces between action, was whether winning this war would undo what it had already done to all of them. Whether you could dismantle the source of a trauma and still be left holding the damage. The light turned green. He kept his hand over hers for another 3 seconds. Then he drove. The warrants came on a Wednesday morning. Chairman Choi was detained at his home in the early hours, surrounded by the specific and impersonal machinery of federal law enforcement, badges and procedures, and the complete absence of mercy that is the face of legitimate power when it finally moves. Taeyong, forewarned by some contact inside the process that had not yet been identified, was in motion before they reached him. North, the intelligence suggested, toward the harbor district. It looked, from the outside, like the beginning of the end. Min-suk told Jae-Hyun this in the kitchen of the secondary safe house, which was comfortable but small, and which smelled now permanently of Ja's attempts to recreate the restaurant's tamarind glaze from memory. Eun-woo had organized the spice cabinet by molecular weight, which was technically incorrect as a sorting system but impressed everyone regardless. Taeyong's running, Min-suk said. His financial structure is collapsing. The accounts are frozen. By end of week, he won't have the network to sustain whatever's next. Jae-Hyun nodded. But something sat wrong. He'd been in enough endings to know what they felt like. This felt too clean, too sequential, as if the obstacle was removing itself in an orderly fashion, step by step, without the ugly resistance that real cornered power always showed. "Pull the camera footage," he said. "The glitched segment. I have it. Show me." The footage was grainy in the way that all home security footage is grainy. Not the crisp resolution of surveillance fantasy, but the compressed, slightly blurred reality of a consumer-grade system that had been adequate until it wasn't. Min-suk pulled it up on a laptop at the kitchen table, angled so Jae-Hyun could see. The glitch had occurred at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, 4 days before the crash. A frame dropout in the living room camera that lasted 11 seconds before the feed resumed. Standard equipment behavior, easily explained by a firmware issue or a wireless interference event. Except it wasn't. Min-suk had gone back to the raw data. Behind the dropout, in the frames that the system had still captured but not processed into the visible feed, there were images. Compressed, degraded, but there. He stepped through them manually. 1 frame per second. Living room. Empty. Living room. Empty. Living room. A shape near the far wall. Living room. The shape more defined. A man, standing near the hallway entrance that led to the children's bedrooms. Living room. The man facing the camera. Min-suk paused it there. The image was poor. Partial. The face was turned at an angle that caught only one side in the available ambient light from the street window. The jawline, the left eye, the particular set of a man's shoulders. Not Taeyong. Not Chairman Choi. Someone older. Someone with a stillness that didn't belong to enforcers or operators. The stillness of a man who had reached a position so deeply embedded in the infrastructure of things that he had long since stopped needing to hurry. The man appeared to be looking directly at the camera, and he was smiling. Not aggressively, not as a display of dominance. The way someone smiles who is very, very patient, who has been patient for a very long time, who is still waiting. Jae-Hyun stared at the frozen frame. The room felt smaller. Min-suk said nothing because there was nothing to say. Jae-Hyun reached over and closed the laptop. He sat with both hands flat on the table. The same gesture, the same stillness. And in the quiet, safe house kitchen that smelled like tamarind and children's routines and the careful scaffolding of a life rebuilt from the ground up, his phone vibrated. Unknown number. He looked at the screen. One message. He read it. Then he set the phone face down on the table. Min-suk was watching him. After a long moment, what does it say? Jae-Hyun's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. The single tell of a man who had trained every external response out of himself except this one small physical thing. This one place where the interior leaked through. He turned the phone over. The message read, "You destroyed the branch. Asterisk, you forgot about the roots. Asterisk." Min-suk read it. Read it again. "Chairman Choi isn't the father," he said slowly. Not a question. Arriving at it in real time, watching the pieces assemble. He's the branch. The man in the footage. There are levels, Jae-Hyun said quietly, that I knew existed and chose not to think about. Because thinking about them would have required a different kind of war. And I didn't want a different kind of war. The silence in the kitchen was total. Outside, somewhere in the house, Jia was humming something. The sound traveled through the wall, small and domestic and terrifyingly precious. "What do we do?" Min-suk said. Jae-Hyun stood up from the table. He straightened his Henley. He moved to the kitchen doorway and looked down the hallway toward the sound of humming. "A tiger with butterfly wings," Jia had said. Scientifically possible, in a certain way. He thought about what he owed the people in this house. He thought about what he had promised Amara. Not survival, not management, but ending. He thought about what kind of man walks into the deepest level of this and comes back as himself. He thought about whether that was still possible. He didn't know, but he turned back to Min-suk. And something in his expression settled, not into the coldness of the man he used to be, but into something harder than that and strangely more difficult to face. The resolve of a man who has everything left to lose and has decided it doesn't matter. "We go deeper," Jae-Hyun said. Min-suk held his gaze, nodded once, and somewhere in the distance, real or imagined, the tiger that had never truly slept opened its eyes. End of part 2. And that's where we leave Jae-Hyun tonight, standing at the edge of something that didn't end the way he thought it would, staring into a depth he'd spent years pretending wasn't there. He ended the branch, but the roots run further than any of us knew. The man in that camera footage, the smile that waited in the dark while his children slept, that's not a threat you file paperwork on. That's a different kind of war. The question is he still the right man to fight it? If you made it all the way to the end of this story, I need you to do 3 things right now. Hit that like button. Seriously, it takes 1 second and it genuinely helps. Subscribe if you haven't already, because part 3 is coming and you do not want to miss what's in that camera footage. And drop your city in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. London? New York? Sydney? Melbourne? Toronto? Dubai? Let me know. This story isn't over. Neither is he. See you in part 3.